This is Mark Mullenax, welcoming you back to our verse-by-verse podcast, treating each of the 81 verses of the Tao Te Ching. We use my 2021 translation of this work, published by Fortress Press. Today, verse 60, Easy Does It.
When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. The sweet sound of the river as she moves over the stones. The same song that the blood in your body sings as it weaves around your bones. When you're listening, are you listening?
If you cook a small fish, don't remove its entrails, don't scrape off its scales, and don't eat it. If you do, it will turn to mush. Likewise, too much government makes those below rebel, and too much cultivation makes vitality wither. Ho Sheng Kung.
I hope the teachings from this class are helpful. We've been through enough verses to realize that there are several recurring themes, particularly Wu-Wei. So, class, I would like to rethink yet again how that power for the peaceful is actually the practice of Wu-Wei in all directions, all the time. Withdrawing, retiring, and letting go, instead of scheming, advancing, and clutching. 360 degrees, 24/7, 365. Today's other voice is Chandler Schroeder, who agreed to return to the podcast when needed. Chandler, remind us of who you are.
Well, thanks, Mark. I am a seeker who hopes I never find the answers. I'm an adventurer who looks for excitement in every little step of the way. And I really hope to always be a lover of the truth and knowledge and one another.
Sounds like somebody I'd like to know. Before we get to today's verse 60, there's one unfinished thought from 59. Last time I asked us to consider taking on some practices of being a soul force in the world. One thought that may prove helpful for you sages and soul forces in training is to direct our attention ever so briefly to Joseph Campbell. He advised anyone who would be awake and be a soul force for good to do one thing every day. Sequester yourself every day for at least 30 minutes. In that 30 minutes that are yours alone, it may not matter so much what you do or don't do, but that you keep on practicing that time alone, and in that time you are not available to anyone. There's no person, no pet, no phone, no electronic device to interrupt. Daily, you just keep on doing what you do, without advertisement or publicity, so that you and your soul befriend each other ever more intimately. And over time, the quiet confidence that emerges is your treasure. Again, it doesn't matter what you do in that time alone. Hike, read, pray, meditate, practice a musical instrument. It's the time alone, day after day, that builds a reservoir of confident peace. And that's who you become. Now to verse 60. Each verse since verse 57 and continuing into verse 67 contains a variation on one theme, one message for leaders. To rule wisely is to practice ego less, and instead practice Wu-Wei more. Note well, dear class, this Wu-Wei is no woo-woo. Wu-Wei's application is for rulers, and we are beginning to realize it applies pretty equally, not just to government leaders, but also to parents, teachers, and leaders at any level. And today, we include cooks and chefs. But in all of these, the way to mess up is to mess with, meddle. Make that simple ever complex. Overthink. Interfere where it ain't your business. Do wrong things at the wrong time. Instead of easy does it, we do complicated does it. Don't make needless rules and regulations where none are needed or heeded. And most of all, don't hold on to things that are not meant to be held on to. In a phrase, When we are in states of Tao forgetfulness, we practice the temporary instead of practicing eternity. Whosoever would clutch, hold on to, and mess with the simple would mess and meddle with the long pre-existent and eternal natural order of our universe. Does it seek home yet to us that there's an original order and path the universe takes and has taken? With natural processes that got this universe here, today, in the wondrous homeostasis and equilibrium that it contains? Well, maybe we do, sometimes. However, when we mess with and meddle in and cling to, we stick our dirty fingers and clumsy tools into the recipe of the universe that the universe does not require. Governing, teaching, parenting, even cooking least is governing, teaching, parenting, cooking best. Less entanglement on our part maintains the balance among yin and yang energies. When yin and yang are aligned, things go better, and what we consider bad or evil diminishes. In a state where rulers understand this alignment, when the heavy rains come, well, the drainage systems have already been in place. Borders are protected because neighboring states have no bone to pick with you, their good neighbor. And economic prosperity spreads among the people because all those entangling and temporary tangents that could happen just don't. And why? Because the government, the parents, the teachers have quietly laid out the solid foundations in roots of Tao, or the way that things ought to operate. So naturally, the potential flood is drained away safely. Naturally, borders are not high walls separating, but are good neighbor arrangements that mutually benefit neighbors on either side of the border. But create some imbalance of yin or yang, and all bets are off. So good government is like good parenting or good teaching and even good cooking. To interfere is to set up all kinds of blockages for the transfer of your energy, the kind we talked about in verse 59, to your people, your kids, your students, and even your menu for tonight's meal. All the good intended by these fine folks gets blocked by our temporary tangents and control-freaking schemes. Just keep it simple.
Verse 60, keeping things simple. Governing a large nation is like cooking a small fish. Easy does it. Rule with Tao, and while under heaven evil spirits and deities remain, their influence to sway and deceive people, and thus even the need for sages, diminishes. So with nothing to frighten, mislead, or oppose, virtue strengthens and surfaces yet again.
Class, there's something really powerful going on here once we peek under the hood of the world and its ways. Something deep is going on at the core of the way the world really works. It's our world's operating system. It's almost like an unknown power here, but it's an open secret to you in this class. And it's this secret: doing less is the way to do the necessary. Doing less means, yes, we have to do some things. Governments need to raise money to build roads and infrastructures and keep air traffic safe and emergency services at the ready. Teachers need to build inclusive lessons plans, and parents can allow a child to do what she feels drawn to do, but these parents still install guardrails to keep the child safe. Wu-Wei is doing only the necessary and then retiring. Wu-Wei is a spiritual or metaphysical, even philosophical concept that's got me thinking today. Moons, tides, trees, even people grow and then stop. Waves arise up to a point and then disappear. This is a well-ordered universe already, Chandler. Why do we insist on meddling with such mastery?
Well, of course I do. You know me. So in thinking about this verse prior to today, one of the things that I thought back on was first Karl Marx, the Communist Manifesto. On paper, it's one of the most beautiful ways for people to learn to live. It only turns its coin when you involve the human being. We have to be in charge. You mentioned earlier being a control freak. And I think human nature is that. We are trying for equilibrium. And if we're able to trust that equilibrium, then we can trust in the process. I go back and I think a lot about the patients that I work with, mental health and substance use disorder folks. And some of the things that we've already talked about today are extremely important in recovery. Keep it simple. Easy does it. One day at a time. These are monikers that everybody has heard through AA and NA and other groups. Obviously, it works if we just let it.
If we just let it. If we just let it.
When you're listening, when you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, when you're listening, are you listening?
There are 3 teachings today. The first is just a reminder. Remember that Tao is capital R reality itself. We on the Taoist way learn that we and the universe are made of the same stuff and operate by the same laws and processes. The same power that got you here also produced mountains, whales, bacteria, and flowers. The Taoist way is not some nugget of wisdom that just enters through the ears and then you get to talk about it. Tao is not intellectual, but embodied. Tao's enlightenment for us is what whales, bacteria, and flowers already do, and that is being rooted in Tao means the constant practice of aligning one's body, mind, and spirit with the universe's original instructions or factory settings. Tao, or the way of the universe, arose and operates from before time was counted down to this very second. In the Tao worldview, the person is no different from the makeup of the universe. Chinese wisdom is just loaded with assertions that human nature is nothing other than the nature of the universe itself. There's not a human nature that we must first attend to. No, we humans emerge from nature itself. Tremendous fear-reducing confidence resides in knowing that you and the universe operate from the same ancient playbook, sharing the same operating system. So our walking on this planet is not some mere stroll in what we call nature. No. Now, the wide world is our reality. We are part of it. It contains our destiny. Its sky is everyone's and everything's sky as well. Its weather is the weather of all. Its wildness matches the wild freedom already within all creatures. The way an amoeba develops and does its part is the same process as an elephant's. The same water of the hurricane's excess and fury is exactly what we need to drink to live. The same energy pumped out by the sun is too much for us to live within, but when metered and filtered out, the energy of the sun is life-giving, but it's the same sun. Thus, we have this teaching that you don't need much to live on or to live well by, but the same things we live well on are the same things for all beings and all matter. These are endless in their supply, and we only need a little. However, intervene badly, and that weather, that water, that light of the sun, well, can you say global warming? Thoughts, Chandler?
Global warming, that's not one that we have time to get into today, I don't think. I think back to some philosophers that I've followed, and many of us have followed over the years, known as the Beatles.
Yeah.
And the idea of just let it be, like we said earlier. There has to be some form of action, as we've talked about, Mark, in order to make things happen a certain way. However, things work the way they're supposed to work if we let them do that. The more we dip our toes in the water, the more we try to control the water. You look at the ocean, you look at a river, you look at anything like that, with very little interest on our end, it does exactly what it's supposed to do. That's the way of the universe, the way of Tao, in my mind, is we let things organically develop and evolve and function And if we're able to only push ourselves in there as needed, then the whole idea of Wu-Wei, inaction or action not, is the way to make things actually happen.
Okay, class, remember this. Like the rest of the universe, we encounter Tao everywhere, all the time. Tao is the universe's first and perhaps only principle that lasts. There's no vacation or separation from Tao. We have the choice to be mindful of this or go about life unaware of Tao. But in the beginning, whatever and whenever that was, Tao was already there. It was first, the original. And our Johnny-come-lately habits of avarice and clinging and clutching and ego-assisted schemes, being secondary, are ever temporary. No future. Wu-Wei is how the universe operates. Appear, have your time, and then retire. And that's what brings me today to this new realization that I think what Wu-Wei really is doing a little bit and then knowing exactly when to retire. But it's a practice. The more you practice it, the more automatic it becomes.
The government that takes peace as its basis doesn't lose the way. When the government doesn't lose the way, yin and yang are in harmony. When yin and yang are in harmony, wind and rain arrive on time. When wind and rain arrive on time, the spirit world is at peace. When the spirit world is at peace, the legions of demons can't perform their sorcery. Wang Chen.
So that brings us to our second teaching, Chandler, suffering and evil. Here's where we discuss that curious phrase in verse 60.
Rule with Tao, and while under heaven, evil spirits and deities remain.
Let's start this second part with two quotes, Chandler.
All the suffering there is in this world arises from wishing ourselves to be happy. All the happiness there is in this world arises from wishing others to be happy. Shantideva from the Bodhisattva way of life. All suffering comes from desiring happiness for oneself. Jamgon Kongtrul.
So our verse 60 today acknowledges what we perhaps too easily call evil actually exists. But this evil is not some diabolical mega force bent on destroying the good. Though over the long haul, this evil that this verse speaks of is perhaps as destructive. But the Chinese word used here is not evil, but kui, or ghost. Kui in Chinese script depicts a person standing in a field, someone lost, alone, without direction. Ghosts were and remain popular in Chinese and other societies. But a ghost is a departed spirit, but who departed the land of the living after an incomplete or a wrongly lived life, and now has to make some karmic amends. Today, many of you will understand how a ghost may linger around a place because of its unfinished business, or it's done wrong things that still have life and effect. Examples of such ghosts in China include pestilence ghost, nightmare ghost, hungry ghost, drought ghost, venomous ghost, and even trickster ghost. Verse 60 speaks to the energies, these kui ghosts, of departed persons who were too greedy, rapacious, grudge holders, confusion spreaders, carnal, and frauds, to start a very long list. The point here is that both moral and not so moral energies, once begun, develop a life of their own. Whether the spirit of a person was useful or destructive, these useful and destructive energies both have long half-lives. This is a phrase by Garrison Keillor. Nothing you do for children is ever wasted. But that's a phrase that cuts both ways. Invest healthy and life-giving energy in a child, and their future's bright. And your investments become legacies down even to their children's children. However, invest destructive, mean, or corrupt energy into a child, and their legacy will be likewise affected. The negative energies we infuse in them will hobble them through the generations.
Every child matters. If we fail our children, we are bound to fail our present, our future, faith, cultures, and civilizations as well. Kailash Satyarthi.
So, class, there's this great urgency here. What we do today matters. Want to know how? The secret of the future lies entirely in our daily routines, like Annie Dillard reminded us in our podcast on verse 59.
How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives.
And we can overcome so-called evil by spending time in the practice of healthy paths, or, conversely, we give artificial life support to these ghosts referred to in verse 60 by staying ignorant of how bad investments in people or the environment or children just lasts and lasts. The spiritual energy here is what I'm after. We can cling to the artificial and get spiritual rope burn scars for life, or we can open up our tight fists, intervene less, and the fish we cook, whether that fish is a people, an organization, a school, or kids, well, they'll turn out more right the less we inject our own bad habits or energies into them. You got any experiences or stories that sort of talk about this?
Talk about that?
Yeah.
Well, so there is a theory in psychology that we use in therapeutic interventions all day long called intentional positivity. And it's something that I try to do. God knows I'm not the best at it. But it's the idea that you do everything that we do with intentional positivity. You find the silver lining. You try to put that energy out into, the world, the universe, to existence with the intention of feeling and being positive. And so when I read this and we talk about this, talking about injecting our own bad habits or energies into, say, our children, I have 4, 5, if you include my stepson. And if I go to them with a positive mindset, even if I'm having to discipline, or even if I'm having to step into something that they're doing that might be negative, if I approach it with intentional positivity, then 9 times out of 10, the outcome is greater than what I ever could have experienced. If that kind of touches on it.
I'm thinking only hashtags Wu-Wei.
Absolutely, yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. So what the sage and what I hope you guys are starting to look for in our governance or in our leadership or in our parenting is not to lead autocratically, but to harmonize the Tao source energies of the people. Just like Chandler was saying, he's trying to harness these powers so that child rearing becomes less onerous. The sage calls upon the people to use their resources, whether it's economic, social, spiritual, moral, so that the people naturally rise to meet the demands of their world. And no heavy hand of government is required for the people to rise. Our verse says the need for the sage diminishes as people get in touch with their own native resources. The leader thus becomes invisible. As verse 17 phrases it, the leader's influence seems to the citizens as if they had done things and directed themselves. So, third, and finally, there's this teaching on the calmness and the economy of Wu-Wei. And this is where we address this verse's final line.
So with nothing to frighten, mislead, or oppose, virtue strengthens and surfaces yet again.
So parents and leaders and teachers and now cooks who practice Wu-Wei retirement in their routines enable this cleared space, one empty of ego and subterfuge and punishment threats and temporary rules. A cleared space, like a runway cleared of traffic so a plane can ascend. This emptiness of the temporary, the ego, of meddling manipulation, allows folks to realize there is nothing that can frighten or mislead or oppose. And this emptiness is when Tao really appears, like the first star in the clean sky. In becoming still, in her practice of Wu-Wei, the sage uncovers nothing less than virtue that has ever and always been there, just waiting for the right conditions for its infinite array of miracles to manifest. What gets manifested is virtue. When thoughts are calm, virtue shows up. When breathing is clear, one gets reminded of one's center, merging with Tao in all things. By embracing the Wu-Wei economy, the sage possesses all that he needs. He does nothing that harms. People look up to the sage because the sage has practiced virtue for a lifetime or more, and thus they naturally do not cause harm in others.
The reason spirits don't harm the people is not because they can't, but because the sage is able to harmonize the energy of the people so that they don't injure the energy of the spirit world. The reason neither injures the other is due to the sage's virtue. Hence, they both rely on the virtue of the sage. Wu Ching.
Well, Chandler, does this mean that the sage or teacher or parent or even the chef is totally hands-off? Oh, no. Wu-Wei is not hands-off. It's knowing when to retire your hands-on. Even governments must raise revenue for fire engines and first responders and road building. Even in cooking, you've got to add things like heat and seasonings. The key is to know when to retire those. And here's how Dylan Evans phrases this in a poem called
The Art of Governance. Governments should not stand aside, letting all beliefs take root. In the soil of a people, some weeds must be pulled, but the garden must be free to grow. Total non-intervention is a dream, but not the path. Order must be kept, harm must be prevented, and society's bonds must hold. Remember, though, that force destroys what it seeks to shape. Subtlety is the art of governance, a hand that moves the stream, but does not block its flow.
As you can speak with my partner, I pretty much suck at cooking fish. You don't want my prepared salmon on your plate, for it is a hardened, compressed piece of, well, for I am consumed with fear that I am undercooking it, and the only way I'm sure it's cooked is when it's overcooked and hard. So I get this verse. It hits me in the home spot. But the teaching here is the calm. The Wu-Wei-led sage or person doesn't so much seek Tao, but allows Tao to work. Not interfering, not meddling, not doing, allows one cool thing that still blows my mind, and that is this. By removing the meddling mind, just and only that, this allows what has always been and already is to emerge, to show up, to surface, and become more conscious. That's Wu-Wei. Wu-Wei is a Taoist concept that gets richer and richer the more it's contemplated and applied. We cannot make a river run faster or slower. We cannot beat our own heart. We cannot start the hormone drip inside you that brings you into adolescence. These are Tao processes. To interfere with what is dangerous. You might as well cooperate with it. Likewise, you cannot make people or force a child or coerce a student to do a damn thing. Instead, you create the conditions for them to thrive and then calmly retire. They'll think they did whatever you hoped themselves. But a person who wholly dedicated to their self and ego desires will never see or feel what is already within them. They'll barely know, and at best only suspect, that a peaceful, unarmed, and unharmed being is who they really are. Someone unable to be misled by the temporary energy of passions, and someone already ready to be a power for peace. As our verse concludes,
So with nothing to frighten, mislead, or oppose, virtue strengthens and surfaces yet again.
all right, Chandler, you got any final thoughts or questions for us?
Yeah, one thought that actually just dawned on me a few minutes ago. Taking this, we're talking about it in a very macro level, as a government or society or, that. I'm starting to think about it in a micro level. The human body operates when it is at homeostasis. We don't have to do anything to create that homeostasis. Yeah. Now, we can eat well, we can exercise, we can get sleep, we can do all of these things to maintain that homeostatic quality. But at the end of the day, we can overdo anything. Yeah. Exercise, for instance. You can exercise so much that you end up breaking your own body down. Yeah. That homeostasis goes away. Yeah. So if we know, which I think inherently we do for ourselves, when to say go and when to say stop, then we allow ourselves homeostasis. If we take that same energy and thought process into the outer world, then I feel like we would inherently know, okay, that's enough.
I think the more we experience and watch Wu-Wei at work, I think the more it becomes internalized, and we don't have to kind of think about it.
Mm-hmm.
My response to you is that when I go camping, usually it's good weather, but I'll look at a stream for 20 minutes or 30 minutes and meditate there, and within my view, there is nothing going wrong. There's no competition. The water's not saying, I want to be bigger than I am. Nothing is really getting out of line or coloring outside its lines. So this homeostasis you talked about, I think, is naturally always there and observable. And sometimes when you're out in nature, that sort of gets on the inside of you. Mm-hmm. You know, without you knowing it, you just automatically become calmer and your blood pressure drops and as the cares will melt away because you're in an area where those cares seem to be, like they really are, temporary. So let's conclude. Cooking a small fish is a great way to consider how you rule your own life. You don't want your life to turn to mush or to fall apart. When you intervene in life, only at a bare Wu-Wei minimum, the demons of chaos, crime, or conflict lessen. You self-sabotage less. You meddle less in other people's lives, and you have more friendships. When you and your life's companions come together without schemes or underhanded and evil plans, there's this rising synergy. Your virtue connects with others, and together you connect more with Tao. Being in Tao's natural flow of awareness is easy on others, and it's easy on yourself. So don't poke your fish. Don't poke your relations. Why put things into contrived, temporary states of confusion? Calmly center with Tao and avoid the pitfalls that come from too much interference in the way or Tao of things. A person of peace does not cause troubles. People who are at war inside, they cause the troubles. Troubles are caused by disturbed folks. And troubles may still exist, but you are, my dear Wu-Wei practitioners, more aware of them and less susceptible to them. Evil loses its power to harm that state one is most responsible for, the state of oneself. Homework time. Imagine how Wu-Wei, just simple retirement of your energy, can help calm the turbid waters of these parts of your life. Your love relationship, your relationship with a parent, your relationship with your phone, your relationship with your monkey mind, your relationship with a child. Notice how when you retire, others do the same. It's an unconscious de-escalation. If you are a motor vehicle or bicycle operator, you already practice Wu-Wei. Oh, really? How? When you make turns, you have a practiced sense of just how much and just when to retire from turning in order to negotiate that turn safely. It's just something you know how to do from practice. You don't talk about it, nor are you conscious of it in the moment. But your confidence in your own Wu-Wei driving skills show up. Likewise, when you become a person who trusts Wu-Wei's ways, notice how others around you relax. Notice how confidence pervades the room. Finally, as I'm wont to do, here's a child-friendly version of this verse. Verse 60, keeping things simple. Taking care of people or matters is like cooking a little fish. Be gentle and don't overdo it. When we follow Tao, the way, even scary things and tricky ideas lose their power. People aren't fooled or scared anymore, so they don't need wise leaders like us to fix everything all the time. When there's nothing left to fear or fight against, kindness and goodness naturally grow stronger, just like sunshine making flowers bloom again. This free podcast is a production of many cool people. including Chandler Schroeder on vocals. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Audrey Davis on artwork, and Molly Hartwell singing. Fortress Press holds the copyright for quotations from my doubted to Ching translation used herein. May your days begin rooted deep in peace, so you may conspire with others to uncover ever-present and custom-made hope, and then share and multiply that hope around you.